At my son's wedding, every guest was served sizzling Wagyu beef and lobster, except me. My plate held wilted salad and stale bread. Then he raised the microphone and joked, "Mom says old people don't need expensive food." The ballroom exploded with laughter. I smiled, opened the small notebook in my purse, and wrote down one sentence. By the end of that night, it would become the first crack in the perfect life he had built on lies. Welcome back to Silent Revenge with Phoenix. Before we dive in, drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had to document something because you knew no one would believe you otherwise? Yes or no? I read your comments more than you think. Some details here have been fictionalized for storytelling, but what matters most is the message and the strength it might give you. The fork trembled in my hand as I lifted a piece of wilted romaine to my lips, the bitter taste sharper than the humiliation. Around me, the Spectator Resort ballroom sparkled with 250 guests celebrating my son's wedding, their laughter rising above the string quartet like champagne bubbles. At every table except mine, servers carved sizzling Wagyu beef and ladled lobster bisque into fine china bowls. The scent of butter and wine filled the air. On my table sat a single plate, wilted salad, 2 slices of sourdough bread going stale at the edges, and a glass of tap water. No flowers, no place card with my name in calligraphy, just a corner spot near the kitchen doors where the air smelled faintly of bleach. I was 68 years old. I had spent 34 years running a school uniform garment factory in Savannah. I knew the difference between an oversight and a deliberate message. "Enjoying your meal, Mom." Corbin Callahan, 39, leaned over my shoulder in his custom Tom Ford suit, champagne glass catching the chandelier light, his smile wide and practiced as a politician's. My son, the boy I'd raised alone after his father died, the man I'd sold my business to fund through law school. "It's perfect, darling," I said, forcing my face into a smile. "Thank you for thinking of me." "Mom always said older folks prefer to eat lighter at events like this," he announced to the nearby tables, his voice carrying. "I had the kitchen prepare something special, just for you." I had never said such a thing, not once in 68 years. Anwen Sterling, 32, stood beside him in her custom Vera Wang gown, her hand possessively wrapped around his arm, diamonds glittering at her throat. Her father owned the Sterling Hospitality Group, the hotel chain that included this very resort. She giggled at something Corbin whispered, and they moved away toward the head table where her parents waited. I set down my fork very carefully. The small clink of metal on ceramic was lost beneath the noise of celebration. My hands had stopped shaking. They'd done that learned to steady themselves after years of threading industrial sewing machines, of signing contracts with suppliers who thought a widow would be easy to cheat, of holding things together when they wanted to fall apart. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small notebook, the kind I used to use for inventory counts at the factory. My fingers found the pen I always carried. April 19th, 2023. I wrote at the top of the first page, 7:30 p.m., then in neat block letters, salad. Across the ballroom, Corbin raised his champagne glass. His toast rang out over the microphone, thanking everyone for sharing this special night, for being part of their journey into the future. He mentioned Anwen's parents. He mentioned his groomsmen. He mentioned distant cousins I'd never met. He didn't mention me. I wrote that down too. The servers brought out the main course for everyone else. The Wagyu came with roasted vegetables and a red wine reduction that I could smell from 3 tables away. At the head table, Anwen's mother, draped in what had to be $10,000 of silk, laughed at something Corbin said. When had I become the family embarrassment he needed to erase? The answer crystallized as I watched him lean close to his new father-in-law, mimicking the older man's gestures, adopting his tone. Somewhere between the law degree I'd funded and the white-collar job in Atlanta he'd used to climb away from his Savannah roots, my son had decided that the woman who'd worked double shifts to give him opportunities was a liability to his new life. I took another bite of salad, wrote down the texture, wilted, bitter, cheap. "Excuse me, is anyone sitting here?" I looked up. Desmond Townsend, 33, a junior associate at Hartwell & Pierce, approached with the hesitant expression of someone looking for an empty chair at a crowded reception. His navy suit was off the rack, his tie slightly crooked. He gestured to the seat beside me. "Please," I said. He settled in, loosening his collar. These things, he said with a tired smile, beautiful but exhausting. I'm Desmond, by the way. I work with Corbin at the firm. How nice, I said. He glanced at my plate, then at the empty wine glass the servers had somehow forgotten to fill. A small frown crossed his face, but he was too polite to comment. Corbin's lucky his mother couldn't make it tonight, Desmond said, making conversation. He mentioned she's in a nursing home in Savannah. Shame, really. I'm sure she would have loved to see this. The ballroom didn't stop. The music didn't pause. The laughter continued its bright, careless rhythm. But something inside me, something that had been bending for 39 years, finally snapped straight. I turned to face him fully. I'm Judith Callahan, I said, my voice perfectly calm. Corbin's mother. Desmond's face went through 3 distinct stages. Confusion, horror, realization. The color drained from his cheeks. Mrs. Callahan, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have. It's quite all right, I said. I picked up my pen, opened my notebook to a fresh line. Nursing home, I wrote. Savannah. Please don't think Corbin must have been mistaken, or I misunderstood. Of course, I said gently. These things happen. But we both knew they didn't. Not like this. Desmond excused himself, quickly mumbling something about needing air. I watched him go, then looked back at my notebook, at the neat rows of facts I was collecting, evidence of something I'd been refusing to see for years. I folded my napkin the way I used to fold fabric at the end of a long day at the factory, precise, final, complete. The linen creased perfectly along the lines I chose, nothing left to chance. I wrote Corbin's name at the top of the page. Beneath it, April 19th, 2023, 7:30 p.m. Then the word salad. Then nursing home. Desmond was watching me from across the room, now his expression troubled. I smoothed my dress, the modest navy one Corbin had suggested was appropriate for someone my age, and stood. The notebook went back into my purse with the same care I'd once used closing out my business ledgers. I had everything I needed now. The knot came at 7 in the morning, 3 sharp raps that pulled me from the first real sleep I'd had in months. I'd returned to my hotel room after the reception, set the notebook on the nightstand, and fallen into bed still wearing the modest navy dress. I checked the peephole. Anwen stood in the hallway, still wearing her wedding gown. The custom beading caught the fluorescent light. Mascara streaked down her cheeks in dark rivers. Her professionally styled hair hung in disheveled waves around her shoulders. She clutched a small overnight bag. Mrs. Callahan, she said when I opened the door. Her voice cracked. I didn't know where else to go. I stepped back, letting her in. She collapsed into the chair by the window, the silk of her dress pooling around her like spilled milk. He left, she whispered. We had our wedding night, and this morning when I woke up, he was gone. Just gone. With a note. I poured water from the bottle on the dresser into a plastic cup and handed it to her. Waited. The note said he needed space to think, that marriage felt different than expected, that he'd call when he figured things out. Her hands shook as she drank. We've been together for 2 years, Mrs. Callahan. 2 years, and he leaves me the morning after our wedding. What else happened last night? I asked quietly, after the reception. We got back to the bridal suite, and I thought we'd talk about the wedding, about how magical everything was. Instead, Corbin spent an hour on his phone calling his law school friends to brag about the connections he'd made at the reception. My father's friends, specifically. Her voice hardened, some of her natural steel reasserting itself. He kept talking about how this marriage was his ticket to the big leagues, how my family's name would open doors his background never could. He said he'd finally escaped his small-town roots and blue-collar baggage, those exact words. On our wedding night, he was celebrating escaping from you. The words should have hurt. Instead, they crystallized something I'd been refusing to see. What else did he say about me? Anwen looked down at her hands. That you were manipulative. That you'd loaned him money he never asked for just to control him. That you were, God, I'm so sorry, financially incompetent and a burden. That you'd never approved of me because I came from money and you'd spent months trying to sabotage our relationship. Each lie was a brick in a wall he'd been building for years. A wall between his past and his future. When exactly did Corbin propose to you, I asked. She frowned at the change in subject. April 8th. Why? April 8th. 11 days after I signed away the townhouse on March 28th. The wedding wasn't a beginning. It was an exit strategy. I offered her the bathroom to clean up. Fresh towels, a robe. She locked herself inside, and I heard the shower start. The sound of water covered what might have been crying. 2 hours later, I was driving back to Savannah. The morning sun turned the coastal highway gold, but I barely saw it. My hands were steady on the wheel. My mind was doing calculations. My house sat on a quiet street where azaleas bloomed pink against weathered fences. The place was small, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that smelled like the lemon oil I used on the old wooden table. On that table sat my 1962 Singer sewing machine, the first piece of equipment I'd ever owned. It had sewn 10,000 school uniforms over 3 decades. Corbin used to sit at my feet while I worked, asking why I stayed up so late. "So you don't have to baby," I'd told him. "So you can have better." Now I knelt beside my bed and pulled out the metal lockbox I kept underneath. Inside were 3 years of documents. I spread them across the floor in neat rows the way I used to organize fabric patterns. Bank statements showing wire transfers I never authorized. The townhouse transfer deed, my signature dated March 28th. 8 loan agreements, each bearing my name as co-signer. Each signature, a careful forgery. My late husband's life insurance policy, the one I thought was still building value, emptied. I got my magnifying glass, my yellow highlighter, a calculator. 4 hours later, I had the number. The factory sale had netted $280,000. The townhouse appraisal, $320,000. My husband's life insurance, $150,000. Add the forged loans, the wire transfers, the systematic draining of accounts I'd built over 34 years of running a business, $743,000. I wrote it in my notebook, underlined it 3 times. 34 years of building a garment business from nothing. 22 years of widowhood managing money carefully so I'd never be a burden. All of it gone. Taken by the boy I'd taught to tie his shoes, to read, to believe that hard work and integrity mattered. The Singer sewing machine sat in the corner the way it had for 40 years, outlasting marriages and businesses and sons who thought they could erase the women who made them. I picked up my phone. The first call was to Dr. Lorraine Blackwell, my physician of 20 years. "Lorraine," I said when she answered, "I need a comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation, every cognitive test you can run, and I need copies of my complete medical records for the last 3 years." There was a pause. "Judith, what's going on?" "I'm preparing for my son to claim I'm incompetent," I said calmly. "I want documentation dated before he makes that claim." "I'll schedule you for Tuesday morning," she said quietly. "First appointment." The second call was to Desmond Townsend. I'd found his number through the firm's website. "Mrs. Callahan," he said, his voice careful. "I've been thinking about you since last night. I'm so sorry about what I said." "Don't be," I told him. "I need to ask you something. Has Corbin been having financial troubles at the firm?" Another pause. "I shouldn't discuss." "I'm not asking you to betray confidences," I said. "I'm asking you to have coffee with me. Wednesday afternoon, Savannah Train Station Cafe." "I'll be there," he said. I set the phone down and looked at the documents spread across my floor. $743,000. A life's work stolen one signature at a time. I had learned a long time ago, always verify your inventory before you open a negotiation. Dr. Lorraine Blackwell, 56, had been my physician for 20 years and understood immediately why I needed comprehensive cognitive testing. She looked up from her tablet when I asked for the neuropsychological evaluation, her pen pausing mid-note. Tuesday morning at 10. Her clinic smelled like antiseptic and the lavender diffuser she kept on the reception desk. The waiting room was empty, except for me. "I need a comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation," I said. "Cognitive testing, memory assessment, executive function, and copies of my complete medical records for the last 3 years." Lorraine set down her tablet. We'd known each other since she opened her practice in Savannah, back when I was still running the factory. She'd seen me through my husband's death, through menopause, through the ordinary wear of aging on a body that had worked hard for 68 years. "Judith, what's going on?" "I'm preparing for my son to claim I'm incompetent," I said calmly. I want documentation dated before he makes that claim." Her face shifted through surprise, understanding, and something that looked like anger on my behalf. "When do you need this?" "As soon as possible. I can do the evaluation today, results by end of week." She stood, pulling files from a locked cabinet. "But I can tell you right now what they'll show. You're sharper than most 40-year-olds I see." "I need it official," I said. "Documented. Sealed." "You're thinking ahead," she said quietly. "That's exactly what someone with excellent cognitive function would do." The test took 3 hours. Word recall, pattern recognition, problem solving under time pressure. I'd spent 34 years managing inventory, negotiating contracts, calculating profit margins in my head while suppliers tried to shortchange me. My brain had been my most valuable tool for decades. When Lorraine sealed the results in an envelope that afternoon, she handed it to me with both hands. "Excellent cognitive function for any age," she said. "Superior memory retention. No signs of decline. Dated and notarized." I slipped it into my purse next to the notebook. Corbin thought he knew me. He had forgotten that I'd spent 34 years negotiating with fabric suppliers who tried to cheat me every quarter. Men who assumed a widow would be easy to manipulate. I'd outlasted all of them. Wednesday afternoon, I drove to the cafe near Savannah's train station. The place smelled like burnt coffee and fried eggs. Chrome stools lined a counter that had probably been there since the 60s. Through the window, I watched Spanish moss sway from live oak trees. Desmond arrived 20 minutes late, his tie loosened, his face drawn. He'd driven 3.5 hours from Atlanta. "Thank you for coming," I said as he slid into the booth across from me. "Mrs. Callahan, I've been thinking about what you said, about Corbin's financial troubles." He pulled his phone from his pocket, his hands unsteady. "I shouldn't be showing you this, but I took photos because something felt wrong." He turned the screen toward me. A mortgage document, grainy but legible. I recognized the address immediately, my Savannah townhouse. The one I'd signed over to Corbin for $1. "The signing owner is listed as you," Desmond said, "not Corbin. But this document was filed 2 months ago, used as collateral for a business loan. I saw it in the conference room after a meeting. Corbin left it exposed." My hand stayed steady as I studied the signature. A careful forgery. Close enough to fool a casual observer, not close enough to fool me. I'd signed my name thousands of times on factory invoices. "He used my signature," I said, "without my knowledge." "There's more." Desmond swiped to another photo. "An $85,000 loan agreement, personal investment fund. You're listed as co-signer." I looked at the second document. Another forged signature. Same careful mimicry, same illegal intent. "I took these photos because I handle compliance," Desmond said. "When documents don't match our records, I investigate. But this is your son, Mrs. Callahan, your family. I didn't know what to do." "How many documents?" I asked. "Just these 2 that I've seen. But if he did it twice, he did it more than twice." I pulled my notebook from my purse, opened it to the page where I'd written the number, turned it so Desmond could see. $743,000. 3 years of systematic theft. Forged signatures on at least 8 loan agreements I know about. Desmond's face went pale. "Judith, I don't think this is just about the money." The cafe was nearly empty. An old man at the counter reading yesterday's newspaper, a waitress refilling salt shakers. The ordinary world continuing around us while we sat in the wreckage of my son's betrayal. "No," I said. "It's about erasing me entirely, making sure I couldn't question, couldn't resist, couldn't interfere with his new life." The nursing home lie at the wedding, the manipulative mother narrative. If I'm incompetent, nothing I say matters. Desmond stared at the documents on his phone. "This is federal identity theft." "Yes." "What are you going to do?" I thought of the envelope in my purse, the medical records proving my competence, the notebook documenting 3 years of fraud, the photos Desmond had just shown me. "I'm going to verify the rest of my inventory," I said, "and then I'm going to have a conversation with my son." The boy who used to sit at my feet while I sewed had become a man who forged my name on federal loan documents. Somewhere between the child who brought me dandelions and the lawyer who served me wilted salad, I'd lost track of who he was becoming. I showed Desmond the photograph of the loan document again, watching his face go still as understanding settled in. "This isn't just about money anymore," he said quieter this time. I folded my hands around my coffee cup. The ceramic was warm against my palms. Outside, the afternoon sun slanted through the live oaks. "No," I said. "It never was." Thursday afternoon, the day before I planned to drive to Atlanta, I spent 4 hours preparing the pages. Bank statements, loan agreements, the townhouse deed, Desmond's photos printed and notarized, medical records sealed in their envelope. Every piece of evidence systematized, indexed, cross-referenced. Anwen's face filled my laptop screen that evening. Her expression caught between defiance and doubt. She'd moved from the hotel to a short-term rental in Charleston. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, no makeup, wearing a sweatshirt instead of silk. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began. "About Corbin. Maybe he had a reason for everything. Maybe I'm overreacting." I waited. Let her work through it. Marriage is complicated right now. He was probably just stressed about the wedding. And the things he said, he might not have meant them the way they sounded. "Did you check the account I mentioned?" I asked quietly. A long pause. Her face changed. "Yes." "What did you find?" $47,000. Her voice was hollow. "Withdrawn over 6 months, to an account I've never seen before. When I called the bank, they said it was a personal investment fund, in Corbin's name only." "What do you want to do now?" "I don't know." She looked down at her hands. "Mrs. Callahan, what do I do now?" "Tell me exactly what documents Corbin asked you to sign before the wedding." She recited them from memory. "A prenuptial agreement, a joint account authorization, a beneficiary designation for his life insurance, and something he called a trust fund release. He said my father insisted on it for estate planning." I recognized all of them. None were what Corbin had claimed they were. "The prenup wasn't a prenup," I said. "It was a power of attorney that would let him access your accounts. The joint account authorization gave him full withdrawal rights without your signature. The beneficiary designation probably named someone else. And the trust fund release," I paused, "that was likely a loan application using your credit." Her face went white. "How do you know?" "Because he did the same thing to me. Different documents, same pattern." Friday morning, I drove to Atlanta. 3 hours on I-16, then merging into the city traffic. The briefcase sat on the passenger seat, my late husband's old leather tool carrier. He'd used it to haul wrenches and socket sets when he was a mechanic. I'd repurposed it for contracts and invoices when I started the factory. Now it carried 47 pages of evidence against our son. Hartwell and Pierce occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in downtown Atlanta. The lobby was all white marble and crystal chandeliers. Everything designed to intimidate, to remind you that this was a place for people who mattered. Rebecca Hartwell, the polished receptionist at Hartwell and Pierce, looked at me with barely concealed confusion when I said I was Corbin's mother. Her smile faltered. "I'm here to see Corbin Callahan," I said. "Tell him his mother is here to discuss some family business." His mother. She glanced at her computer screen. But Mr. Callahan mentioned his mother was unable to travel due to health issues. "As you can see," I said calmly, "I'm in perfect health." 20 minutes later, Corbin emerged from the elevator. He'd changed from his honeymoon casual into his most expensive suit, but I could see the strain around his eyes, the tight line of his mouth. "Mom, what are you doing here?" His voice was low, urgent. "This is my workplace. You can't just—" "I can, and I have," I said. "We need to talk. Privately." His office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, diplomas on the wall, expensive furniture, photographs of Corbin with politicians at charity galas, shaking hands with judges. Not a single picture of me. I set the briefcase on his desk and opened it, began spreading documents across the polished surface. 47 pages, each one a piece of the puzzle. "If you sue me, you'll lose everything in legal fees," Corbin said. "You can't afford to fight me." I looked up at him. "I'm not here to sue you, Corbin. I'm here to return everything you gave me, starting with the truth." "What is this?" He picked up one of the bank statements. "Mom, you don't understand business." "I spent 34 years running a business," I said quietly. "These are forged signatures. This is identity theft. This is wire fraud." I pointed to each document in turn. This is the townhouse you claimed I gifted you, used as collateral without my knowledge. This is my husband's life insurance, emptied. These are 8 loan agreements bearing my forged signature. This is Desmond Townsend's notarized statement about what he witnessed. Corbin's face had gone pale. Where did you get these files? From my lockbox, from the bank, from people who care about the truth. You can't prove I already have. I reached into the briefcase one last time, pulled out a business card, and placed it on top of the documents. FBI, Financial Crimes Division. I filed my complaint yesterday. Corbin stared at the card. His hand trembled as he picked it up. You had no right, he said. His voice cracked. I had every right. You stole from me. You forged my name. You tried to erase me from your life while taking everything I'd built. I closed the briefcase, stood up, smoothed my dress, the same modest navy one from the wedding. The FBI has copies of everything on this desk, I said. So does Desmond Townsend. So does my attorney. So does Dr. Blackwell, along with documentation of my current mental competence dated 4 days ago. I walked toward the door. Mom, wait. I didn't look back, but I heard him pick up his phone before I reached the elevator. His voice rising panic, finally breaking through that polished veneer. The elevator doors closed on the sound of Corbin pleading with someone. I already knew who he was calling, probably his lawyer, maybe Anwin's father, possibly someone he thought could fix this. I also knew it wouldn't matter. By Monday, he would make his first desperate move, and I had already prepared for it 4 days ago. Desmond's call came Monday morning while I was measuring fabric at the Singer sewing machine, his voice tight with something between anger and disbelief. Judith, I need you to sit down. I set down the measuring tape. What happened? Corbin submitted medical records to Hartwell and Pierce's Human Resources Department Friday afternoon. The documents claim you've been diagnosed with early-stage cognitive decline and that you're no longer competent to manage your own financial affairs. The words hung there, each one sharper than the last. That's a lie. I know it's a lie, Desmond said, his fury barely contained. But it gets worse. He's using these forged documents to justify why he needed temporary authority over your accounts. He's painting himself as the dutiful son protecting his failing mother. I thought of the April 22nd evaluation I'd requested from Dr. Blackwell, the cognitive assessment I'd scheduled 3 weeks ago, the same week I'd discovered the first missing transfer. The thoroughness I'd learned running a factory for 34 years extended to everything, including preparing for battles I could see coming. There's more, Desmond continued. We found an $85,000 personal loan from March 14th. Your signature, your social security number, your employment history at the factory, all documented perfectly. Except you didn't sign it. March 14th, I repeated, my mind already calculating. That was 2 days before he transferred the first $118,000 from my savings account. He was building a financial fortress, Desmond said quietly. The loan gave him immediate cash. The medical records gave him a narrative. If anyone questioned the transfers, he had documents showing you were incompetent and he was protecting you. I had spent 34 years preparing for people who underestimated me, suppliers who thought a woman couldn't negotiate contracts, inspectors who assumed I wouldn't understand safety codes, competitors who believed I'd fold under pressure. I'd learned to stay 3 steps ahead, to document everything, to never let anyone see me coming until it was too late. Corbin had made one fatal miscalculation. He'd assumed I hadn't changed since the days when I deferred to his father on every decision. He'd looked at the 68-year-old widow and seen only the submissive wife I'd been decades ago, never recognizing the factory owner who'd emerged after Thomas died. What's our next move? I asked. Philip Grayson is already on it, Desmond said. He handles compliance at Hartwell and Pierce, and he doesn't take kindly to fraud. He's contacting Dr. Blackwell directly to verify these medical claims. Before I tell you how Dr. Blackwell's call exposed Corbin's forgery, drop a comment. Did Judith plan the April 22nd evaluation specifically to counter this, or was it just lucky timing? I need to know what you're thinking. Remember, while these events are fictionalized for storytelling, the emotional truth of family betrayal cuts deeper than any invented detail. Philip Grayson, senior partner in charge of compliance at Hartwell and Pierce, had built his reputation on thorough due diligence. When fraudulent medical records landed on his desk claiming a major client's mother suffered cognitive decline, he didn't accept them at face value. He verified them. His call to Dr. Blackwell came Tuesday morning, April 29th. By Tuesday afternoon, I received a call from Dr. Blackwell's office. Mrs. Callahan, I wanted you to know that Hartwell and Pierce contacted me this morning, requesting verification of medical records, claiming you'd been diagnosed with cognitive impairment. And what did you tell them? I told them the truth. You came to my office April 22nd requesting a comprehensive cognitive evaluation. The results showed no signs of decline whatsoever. In fact, I noted in my report that you demonstrated exceptional organizational thinking and proactive health management. The proactive medical evaluation I'd scheduled 3 weeks ago, the one I'd requested the same week I discovered the first suspicious transfer, had just demolished Corbin's carefully constructed lie. He'd forged documents claiming I was failing. I had documentation proving I was sharp enough to see his scheme coming before he'd even fully executed it. Did Corbin ever watch me work during those years at the factory? Did he see the way I triple-checked every order, maintained duplicate records, planned for contingencies that never materialized because I'd already prevented them? Or had he been so certain of my irrelevance that he never bothered to study the woman he was trying to erase? Mr. Grayson indicated these records appear to be fraudulent. Dr. Blackwell continued, her voice carrying the careful precision of someone who understood she was now part of a legal matter. He's documenting everything for their internal investigation. Wednesday morning, Desmond called again. Philip Grayson just briefed me. The medical forgery changes everything, Judith. This isn't just financial fraud anymore. It's identity fraud, medical fraud, and attempted legal incapacitation. He tried to have you declared incompetent using fabricated medical evidence. The fabric beneath my fingers, the same cotton twill I'd once turned into 10,000 school uniforms, felt solid and real. The factory had taught me that the most dangerous opponent wasn't the one who fought loudly. It was the one who documented quietly. Corbin had spent years convincing people I was less than. I was less capable, less strategic, less worthy of respect. He had never once considered that I might have spent those same years preparing for exactly this moment. Brent Sterling's voice on Thursday morning carried the weight of a man who had discovered he'd been played for a fool. Mrs. Callahan, I owe you an apology, and I owe my daughter the truth. I set down my coffee cup, the porcelain clicking against the saucer. What did you find, Mr. Sterling? I hired independent auditors the day after the wedding. Something about the way Corbin presented himself never sat right with me. Too polished, too perfect. The auditors finished their report yesterday. He paused, and I heard paper rustling in the background. Corbin inflated his income by 340% on the financial disclosures he gave us, claimed real estate assets that don't exist, represented himself as managing a $20 million investment fund that turned out to be an empty account with a sophisticated-looking website he'd built himself. I've filed a formal complaint with the FBI Atlanta field office and submitted a full disclosure to the Securities and Exchange Commission. My attorney is filing civil fraud claims simultaneously. The convergence was happening without coordination. My attorney pursuing civil fraud, Philip Grayson documenting medical forgery at Hartwell and Pierce, and now Brent Sterling bringing securities fraud and criminal charges from an entirely independent investigation. Corbin had built a house of cards so elaborate that it was collapsing from multiple directions simultaneously. Mr. Sterling, I think we should both talk to the FBI. I was hoping you'd say that, he said quietly. My attorney is coordinating with the Atlanta field office. They want to meet with you Monday morning if you're available. I'll be there. Mrs. Callahan, his voice cracked slightly. I'm sorry I didn't see this before he married my daughter. I'm sorry I didn't protect Anwen the way you're protecting yourself. You're protecting her now, I said. That's what matters. After he hung up, I walked to the bedroom closet and pulled down the navy blue notebook from the top shelf, the one I'd started the night of the wedding reception while sitting at that corner table with wilted salad and cold chicken. 47 pages of handwritten documentation, dates, times, dollar amounts, witnesses, photographs, medical records, copies of forged signatures. For the first time, I was not the only one who wanted the truth. I was simply the one who had it most completely. Monday morning, Desmond drove me to the FBI Atlanta field office on Century Parkway. The building looked exactly like what it was: serious, institutional, immune to charm. Special Agent Catherine Brennan, 42, had spent 15 years with the FBI Financial Crimes Division and recognized a meticulously documented case when she saw one. She sat across from us in a small conference room, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes moving across the pages of my notebook with the focus of someone who knew exactly what she was looking at. Mrs. Callahan, walk me through this. I opened to the first page. April 19th, wedding reception. I noticed Corbin avoided introducing me to any of his colleagues. When I approached his table, he moved me to a corner with expired food. That's when I started writing things down. But the financial documentation goes back further. March 16th, I said. The first unauthorized transfer from my savings account. I didn't discover it until April 7th, but once I did, I started gathering everything: bank statements, property records, loan applications, medical evaluations. Agent Brennan turned pages slowly, photographing each one with a small camera. The medical records from Dr. Blackwell. Corbin tried to have me declared incompetent using forged documents. I'd requested a cognitive evaluation 3 weeks earlier as insurance. Dr. Blackwell's report proved the forgery. And these are copies of the forged loan signatures. $85,000, March 14th. I never signed that application. She closed the notebook carefully, the way someone handles evidence they know will end up in court. We're taking the case. Wire fraud, identity theft, bank fraud, financial elder abuse. Your documentation gives us everything we need for federal prosecution. She looked up. Tell me about flight risk. He canceled all his meetings starting April 28th, I said, the day after Desmond confronted him on my behalf. Agent Brennan opened her laptop, fingers moving across the keyboard. She pulled up a database screen, entered Corbin's name, and waited. The screen populated with results. Her expression shifted, not surprise exactly, but the grim recognition of a pattern she'd seen before. One-way Emirates flight to Dubai, departure May 15th, ticket purchased March 28th. The date hung there between us. 3 weeks before his wedding, Desmond said quietly. The wedding I'd sat through with wilted salad on my plate had never been a beginning. It was a finale. Corbin had booked his escape before he'd ever stood at that altar, before he'd promised Anwen a future he had no intention of providing, before he'd moved me to that corner table where nobody would notice the mother he was already erasing. The lavish reception at the Charleston Yacht Club, the 500-person guest list, the orchestrated perfection it had all been theater, an elaborate distraction while he positioned the final pieces of his disappearance. Your son was never planning a future here, Mrs. Callahan, Agent Brennan said, her voice carrying the practiced gentleness of someone who delivered devastating truths regularly. He was planning a disappearance. I know, I said. That's why I started writing things down that night. She looked at me across the desk where my wedding reception notebook lay open to the first page. April 19th, 2023, 7:30 p.m., Salad, nursing home. You started documenting at the reception itself. No, I said. I started documenting the night I signed over the townhouse deed. The reception was just when I knew it was time to use it. Agent Brennan had looked at me differently after that admission. Not with pity anymore, but with the quiet recognition that comes when someone realizes they've underestimated you. The phone call from Desmond came Saturday morning, May 13th, his voice carrying the hollow quality of someone delivering news they still couldn't quite believe. He's gone, Judith. Apartment empty, phone disconnected. Left behind $340,000 in debt. I stood at the kitchen window watching morning light cut across the backyard where Corbin used to play as a child. The Dubai flight is in 2 days. He ran early. FB. I found his company laptop in the apartment, wiped clean, hard drive scrubbed. 3 months unpaid rent. Creditors filing judgments against an address he'd already abandoned. They've issued a nationwide warrant. After Desmond hung up, I walked to the spare bedroom where the Singer sewing machine sat beneath its dust cover, untouched since Thomas died. I lifted the cover slowly, fabric sliding through my fingers the way it had 10,000 times before. 34 years I'd spent at this machine, turning raw material into finished product. Corbin used to sit at my feet during late shifts, watching spools unwind and needles punch through layers of cotton twill. He'd ask why I worked so hard when Daddy made good money. "So you don't have to baby," I'd told him. That had been the mistake. Not working hard, not building something, not protecting him from difficulty. The mistake had been never teaching him that protection had limits, that safety had conditions, that a mother's love didn't erase the need for consequences. I sat at the machine for the first time in 7 years, my hands finding the familiar positions left, guiding fabric right, controlling speed. The motor hummed when I pressed the pedal, a sound that had once meant security and purpose and the satisfaction of work completed correctly. That night, I almost called him, picked up the phone 3 times, Corbin's number still saved under the contact I'd labeled with a small, hand-drawn heart in the notes field when he'd first learned to text me, back when that had seemed like something worth marking. Not to save him, I was long past that. Not to warn him or help him or offer him an escape route he didn't deserve, but to say goodbye to the boy he used to be. The boy who'd sat at my feet, who'd brought me dandelions from the yard, who'd cried when his goldfish died and made me promise heaven was real. The third time I picked up the phone, I set it back down and deleted the contact entirely. The Singer sewing machine sat quietly where it always had, outlasting marriages and businesses, and the boy who used to sit at my feet, watching me work late into the night. Sunday morning, Desmond drove me back to the FBI Atlanta field office with 3 cardboard file boxes and the navy blue wedding notebook. Agent Brennan met us in the same conference room, but this time, her laptop was ready, and an evidence intake clerk stood beside her with a camera and numbered tags. "Mrs. Callahan, what do you have for us?" I opened the first box. Exported iMessage conversations with Corbin, January 2020 through April 2023. Complete threads, nothing deleted. I backed them up to PDF monthly and stored them in cloud storage with 2-factor authentication. She took the bound printouts, carefully flipping through pages of conversations that tracked 3 years of increasingly careful deception. Second box, 23 emails with contract attachments. Property transfers, loan applications, investment documents. I forwarded copies to a secondary email account the day I received each one and printed hard copies within 24 hours. And the third box? 4 original transfer deeds. The townhouse, the Tybee Island cottage, the Hartwell and Pierce retirement account rollover authorization, and the wedding venue deposit check. I kept the originals after signing because Thomas always told me to maintain primary documents for 7 years minimum. Agent Brennan examined each document with the same methodical focus I'd once used for factory inspections, checking corners, reading fine print, noting dates and signatures. This is remarkable, Mrs. Callahan. Everything indexed, annotated, cross-referenced. You have handwritten context notes explaining the circumstances of each document. Factory habit, I said. We maintained production logs for every order: date, time, fabric, batch, machine number, operator. If something went wrong 6 months later, we could trace it back to the exact moment. She opened the navy blue wedding notebook, turning pages slowly. April 19th, 2023, 7:30 p.m., corner table, wilted salad, no introductions. Every detail I'd recorded while Corbin celebrated 50 feet away, already planning his escape to Dubai. You started documenting at the wedding reception itself. No Agent Brennan. I started documenting the night I signed over the townhouse deed. The reception was just when I knew it was time to use it. Agent Brennan closed the evidence binder slowly. She had said nothing for nearly 2 minutes, moving through pages with the focused silence of someone building a mental architecture around what she was reading. "I've worked financial crimes for 15 years, she said finally. Most victims arrive with a shoebox of receipts and a lot of anger. You arrived with an indexed prosecution file." "I ran a garment factory for 34 years, I said. Every order had a paper trail. Every supplier dispute had documentation going back to the original contract. You don't run a business by trusting memory." She nodded, closing her laptop. "By September, this goes to trial. Your documentation will be the foundation of everything." I thought of the Singer sewing machine, sitting quiet at home, the dust cover folded beside it now. Precision lasted longer than passion. I had learned that at the factory, and I had applied it here. I thought of the Singer sewing machine sitting quiet in my spare bedroom, the dust cover folded carefully beside it now. 34 years of measuring and cutting and stitching had taught me exactly one thing: preparation mattered more than speed, and precision lasted longer than passion. Corbin had spent 3 years building his escape. I had spent the same 3 years building his cage. By September, that cage stood in a federal courtroom where 3 years of documentation became exhibits entered into evidence, one careful page at a time. The FBI had arrested Corbin at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport on May 14th, one day before his Emirates flight to Dubai was scheduled to depart. Agent Brennan told me later that they had flagged the one-way ticket the same afternoon I provided it to the Atlanta field office. He had made it as far as the international terminal before federal agents intercepted him at the gate. The federal courtroom fell silent as Anwen Sterling finished her testimony, her voice steady despite the tears tracking mascara down her cheeks. She looked nothing like the radiant bride from April, the woman who'd worn ivory silk and believed she was beginning something beautiful. He said this marriage was his ticket out of where he came from, Anwen said, her words landing in the quiet courtroom like stones dropped into still water. Those exact words on our wedding night. I sat in the gallery beside a woman I'd never formally met, but recognized instantly, the elderly guest from table 12, who'd watched me sit alone with wilted salad while Corbin celebrated 50 feet away. She'd introduced herself that morning in the hallway outside the courtroom. Norma Harrington, she'd said, extending her hand. 71, retired elementary school principal. He took $120,000 from me using the same investment fund scheme he used on his father-in-law. Another victim, another elderly woman, another carefully constructed lie. The pattern was so clear it felt deliberate. Target older women with resources and trust, build elaborate fictional narratives, extract maximum value, disappear before consequences materialized. Except this time, the consequences had materialized, 4 months faster than his timeline allowed. On the witness stand, Anwen continued. I signed 4 documents before the wedding. He told me they were standard prenuptial paperwork. They weren't. The prosecutor displayed the documents on the courtroom screen. Loan applications, account authorizations, property transfer forms, all bearing Anwen's signature beside legal language she'd never read because she'd trusted the man she was about to marry. $47,000, Anwen said, withdrawn from our joint account over 6 months to accounts I never knew existed. Corbin sat at the defense table 30 feet away, looking down at papers his attorney had arranged in precise rows. He never looked up, never met my eyes, never acknowledged the daughter-in-law testifying to his systematic betrayal or the mother sitting in the gallery who'd spent 3 years documenting every step of his carefully planned destruction. When Anwen stepped down from the witness stand, she walked past the defense table without glancing at the man she'd married. Her father, Brent Sterling, stood to meet her at the gallery gate, his arm around her shoulders as they returned to their seats. Norma Harrington reached over and took my hand. We had never spoken before that day. We didn't need to. 7 months, from cold salad on my plate to guilty verdict in federal court. The arc was shorter than I expected, longer than it felt. November 18th arrived with the kind of gray morning that made the courtroom's fluorescent lights feel harsh and necessary. Judge Helena Whitmore, 64, had presided over federal financial crimes for 18 years and recognized a clear-cut case when she saw one. The evidence binders stacked on her bench represented 3 years of my documentation, exported messages, annotated emails, original deeds, the navy blue wedding reception notebook that had started this formal accounting. On all counts, wire fraud, identity theft, bank fraud, financial, elder abuse, the defendant is found guilty. The words came without drama, without the theatrical tension television had taught me to expect. Just facts, delivered clearly by someone who'd examined the evidence and reached the only reasonable conclusion. Corbin stood as the judge continued. The court sentences Corbin Callahan to 7 years in federal prison with full restitution to victims. Georgia Real Estate Commission notified for mandatory license revocation proceedings. Georgia State Bar notified of conviction. 7 years. He was 39 now. He'd be 46 when he walked out, middle-aged and permanently marked by federal conviction. Total restitution to Judith Callahan, $891,000, including principal, accrued interest, and compensatory damages. I opened the navy blue notebook in my lap, the same one I'd started at the wedding reception, the one that had anchored the FBI's investigation. The pages were filled now, 7 months of careful documentation, from April 19th through today. I turned to the last page and wrote, November 18th, 2023. Done. The entry mirrored the opening, April 19th, 2023, 7:30 p.m., Table 12, cold salad, nursing home comment. Beginning and ending marked in the same blue ink. Desmond leaned close as the courtroom began to empty, his voice low. It's over, Judith. No, Desmond. I closed the notebook carefully, feeling the weight of 7 months contained in 47 pages. This part is over. The next part is just beginning. The notebook closed on 7 months the way I used to close ledgers at the factory. One column, balanced another, about to begin. Anwen stopped at my seat on her way out, Brent Sterling standing respectfully behind her. Mrs. Callahan, I wanted to thank you for documenting everything, for not letting him disappear the way he planned. You testified beautifully, I said. She nodded, tears still close to the surface. I keep thinking about that wedding reception. You sitting alone while he pretended I was an orphan. I should have seen it then. We see what we're ready to see, I said. You're ready now. Norma Harrington stood beside me as the courtroom emptied, watching Corbin being led away by federal marshals. He glanced back once, not at me, but at the evidence binders still stacked on the judge's bench. Documentation he'd never imagined existing, created by the mother he'd assumed was too unsophisticated to understand what he was doing. What will you do now? Norma asked. Go home, I said. Make coffee. Sit at the Singer sewing machine and remember what it feels like to build something instead of documenting its destruction. Desmond looked at me as we stood to leave, confused by my response about the next part beginning. He thought this moment was an ending. Justice served, accounts settled, villain punished, victim vindicated. But I had spent too many years running a business to mistake completion for conclusion. The verdict settled accounts. What came next would settle me. What settled me came in 3 parts, spread across the months between the verdict and December. The text messages arrived on a Tuesday evening in October, 3 short vibrations from an unfamiliar number that I almost ignored. I was sitting at the Singer sewing machine, the one I'd uncovered after 7 years of dust, running fabric through my hands without actually sewing, just feeling the texture, remembering what it meant to build instead of document. The screen lit up with words I recognized immediately, despite the jail phone number attached. Mom, please, you're all I have. Then, I made mistakes that you can fix this. Then, if you don't help me, I'll lose everything. I read them sitting in the October evening light, the same light that used to slant through these windows when Corbin was 7 years old and would sit at my feet, asking why I worked so late. So you don't have to baby, I'd told him. That had been the real mistake, not the loving, not the working, not the protecting. The mistake was believing that shielding someone from consequences was the same thing as preparing them for life. I'd spent 34 years building something so he wouldn't have to struggle, and in doing so, I'd never taught him that struggle was how you learned to value what you built. I deleted the messages. All 3, one after another, with the same steady pressure I used to apply to fabric moving through the Singer's needle. No hesitation, no second guessing, no final rereading to torture myself with what-ifs. The 3rd time putting down the phone was the easiest I'd ever done it. The machine sat quietly in the corner, where it always had, outlasting everything he'd tried to take from me. December came with paperwork that felt more ceremonial than necessary. Desmond had warned me the final signing would be mostly symbolic, that the court orders had already executed automatically. His Atlanta office smelled like leather furniture and the particular kind of coffee that came from machines costing more than my first car. He spread 2 documents across the polished conference table. Everything's restored, Judith. The townhouse is back in your name. $891,000 as ordered by the court. The check sat between us, remarkable only for how unremarkable it looked. Just paper and ink, representing 7 months of systematic documentation, 3 years of strategic preparation, and 34 years of learning to value precision over speed. I signed the receipt with the same blue pen I'd used for the wedding notebook. There's one more thing, Desmond said, sliding a folder across the table. I'd like to offer you a position. Senior consultant for our new elder financial abuse practice. Your case demonstrated something important. Victims who document methodically can build their own prosecution. I want to teach other people how to do what you did. I looked at the folder without opening it, feeling the weight of possibility contained in formal letterhead and salary figures I didn't need to read yet. I'll read this at home, I said, next to the singer. I stood on that December sidewalk for a full minute after leaving Desmond's office, just breathing. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I had nowhere I needed to be and no one I needed to take care of. The restitution check sat in my purse. The townhouse deed sat in my briefcase. The job offer sat folded in my coat pocket. And I stood on a sidewalk in Atlanta, watching December afternoon light cut between buildings, breathing air that tasted like freedom I'd forgotten existed. Late December brought morning light through the kitchen windows in Savannah, the kind of golden winter sun that made old houses look exactly the way they were supposed to look, lived in, survived, in worth keeping. The Singer sewing machine sat on a new wooden table I'd bought specifically to display it, wiped clean and oiled for the first time in 7 years. Not hidden, not covered, not apologized for. Anwen arrived first, carrying pastries from the bakery on Bull Street. Norma came 10 minutes later with a bag of good coffee beans, the expensive kind that required grinding. We sat at my kitchen table like we'd done this 100 times before, instead of just twice. Annulment's finalized, Anwen said, warming her hands on the coffee mug. Judge signed it last week. Marriage legally void like it never happened. Restitution cleared, Norma added. $120,000. My retirement accounts whole again. I poured cream into my coffee, watching it swirl and settle into something balanced. Anwen looked at the Singer sewing machine, her expression shifting to something I recognized. The moment when you realize an object represents a larger truth. Corbin wanted you to throw that away, didn't he? The sewing machine. He wanted me to throw away a lot of things that didn't belong to him. The navy blue wedding notebook sat on the counter beside a fresh, empty notebook I hadn't decided whether to fill. The filled one showed everything, April 19th to December 15th, documentation and court dates, and the final entry recording the restitution signing. The empty one waited for whatever came next. Norma raised her coffee mug, holding it steady in both hands. What are we drinking to? I thought of that April evening, the corner table, the wilted salad, the cold chicken, the nursing home comment that had started 7 months of careful accounting. The moment I'd decided to stop being invisible and start being strategic. The notebook closed on those 7 months the way the Singer's presser foot lifted after a completed seam, work finished, thread cut clean. To cold salad, I said, raising my mug. Anwen lifted hers, smiling, despite tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. To cold salad. Norma clinked her mug against ours. To cold salad. We drank together in the December kitchen while morning light made the Singer's metal frame shine like something valuable instead of something forgotten. The revenge wasn't the verdict, or the check, or the 7 years he would spend in federal prison thinking about what he'd done. The revenge was this. A kitchen in Savannah December light through old windows, coffee going warm in my hands, and not a single thing in this room that anyone could ever take from me again. And to you listening to my story, remember this. The most dangerous betrayal often comes from those we protected the most. I spent 34 years running a factory teaching myself precision and preparation. But I never taught my son that actions have consequences. I shielded him from struggle because I loved him, never realizing I was raising someone who would see my love as weakness to exploit. Don't make my mistake. Protection without accountability isn't love, it's permission. These revenge stories with Mom at the center aren't just about justice. They're about reclaiming what was taken through methodical preparation. Family revenge stories teach us that documentation matters more than emotion. When I sat at that wedding reception with cold salad, I could have walked away in shame. Instead, I started writing. I believe God put that navy blue notebook in my purse for a reason, to show me that the same precision I used at the Singer sewing machine could build a case that no charm could dismantle. If this story resonates with you, please leave a comment telling me, would you have started documenting at that wedding, or would you have walked away? Share this with someone who needs to hear that revenge stories with mom don't always end in defeat. Sometimes they end in chosen family and coffee toasts. Subscribe to Silent Revenge with Phoenix for more family revenge stories about strength reclaimed. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time matters to me. Remember, some details in this story have been fictionalized to protect privacy and highlight the lesson. But the message that documentation and preparation can overcome even the deepest betrayal is real.